Today, our topic is Metaverse. So, we'll be looking at all the different technological challenges that basically have to be overcome to make Metaverse a reality. We'll look into some of the fun use cases that might exist inside the Metaverse and maybe brainstorm some scenarios there and then get into the financials of like, would Metaverse be something that's a cash cow for a lot of companies, or would it be a financial disaster? So stay tuned and watch to the end of the video to look at some of these concepts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Everything Product. So we talk about insights on latest technology with a product mic. Let's start with a quick question here. Srinath, what is Metaverse?
Awesome. Thanks, Edo. I think that's been a buzzword that's been roaming around these days, a lot of people. And as you guys know, this concept is coming primarily from like Meta, who has been driving a lot around this. Essentially, I mean, Metaverse is basically a virtual world where you live, work, interact with the people in a physical space. It's kind of transforming your communication through a one way, like sending a text message or an email, uh, transforming that to basically experiencing that in real world, or sorry, in a virtual world, and feeling that presence. It's basically immersing yourself in that environment, and you would feel that you're interacting with the person in real.
Yeah, so that's crazy, right? That's almost something like you do the same things in the virtual world that you do in the real world, right? Like meeting people, talking to people, looking at the full self of that person, interacting with it and all of that stuff. But
Exactly.
looking at the technology what we have right now and all the different VR and AR headsets, we are definitely not there, right? So that's not the ideal scenario at this point. But a lot of these companies are trying to get to that space where it actually feels that you're with a person, interacting with a person, or talking to a person, all of that stuff. And there are a lot of technological challenges that come into, and that has to be solved before we even think of something that is at that sort, which is similar to the real world. So when we look into these technological challenges, right, I would say obviously, right, the first one is the headset being so bulky and so big, right? So maybe I wouldn't want to wear that all day interacting with people, or at least working with that, interacting with people. So that over the time reducing to a size of maybe wearing a glass or a Google Glass, right, would make it more easy for usable and easy for people to use it. So that is one of the challenges, I would say. And the next one is battery, right? So battery is also a challenge at this point, because I think the Meta's Quest Pro basically just has a 1 hour of charge. You have to charge it again after that. So if you want to use it all day long, you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's something that has to be solved. And so I think these are the both are the fundamental technological challenges, and we can also get into details of some of the other ones. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, those are some of the interesting ones. In addition to that, I would like to add some of the technological challenges, especially, for instance, in order to support metaverse, you need a lot of data power, data infrastructure to support that virtual environment, which I don't think we have yet. And in order to scale that across the world, you need tons of data infrastructure and power to power that. In addition, I would also point out about the privacy and security challenges. As we all know, I mean, lately there have been a lot of scrutiny around the social media, where government has been asking a lot of these companies around how these companies use personal information of users. So I would say security and privacy will also be a big aspect and one of the challenges as we come up with this metaverse, because essentially you are experiencing that with you are experiencing the interaction in real world, And in order to we need to make sure that there's a good privacy and security controls, so the information is secured. So there are
Yeah.
tons of other challenges, but I would like to add these two.
Yeah, that's right. So it's almost something like you're interacting with so many people, and the headset basically processes all the data and puts it in a way that it has that similar appearance as a real world. So I was also
Exactly.
digging deep into some of the other ones, right? So as we are saying, talking about a previous scenario where we say that, okay, the virtual world or the metaverse is something similar to the real world. So there are some actual technological challenges that have to be solved to get to that spot.
Exactly.
So some of these technological challenges are, right. So now imagine everything is in a single screen, right? So that's a different problem which we have solved. But you being in a space where you're surrounded with a lot of different things, there are innate technological challenges that comes with that. So
Yep.
some of the very important technological challenges which Meta or some other companies are trying to solve is, I think the first one is the very focal problem. So what does this mean is, imagine you're looking at a movie or a scenic route in a HD TV. It's flat, everything, there's no distance between where the object is, right? It's all on the same level. But when you're in a virtual world, the object you see in front of you is different from an object you see on the wall. So there has to be a difference between how each of these look and how each of these appear and all of that stuff. So I think that's also a problem which these headsets have to solve. So that's the very focal problem. And the next one is distortion problem. So when you look at a Quest Pro headset, it's basically having lenses at the front, and there's a battery at the back, and there's also processors and all of that stuff. So when the image is projected on these lenses, there's a lot of distortion. So
Yes.
the more distortion you have, the more your eye will be able to tell that this is not the real world. So I think reducing that distortion will also make people feel that they're in the virtual world. So that's another technological challenge. And the next one is also something which is very hard to solve, which is the retinal resolution. So at this point, all the displays what we have basically are just like maybe brighter, but not as much bright as the eye. Right? Eye has retinal resolution of I think 60 degrees, 60 per bit degree or something like that. So the normal TV displays and all of that are 10 and 100 times lesser than what the eye can perceive. So if we are able to match that resolution on a headset, I think that's when we'll basically make it comparable to the real world. So that's also a hard problem to solve, because to reach that resolution it needs more lot of energy, and to lead have a lot of energy, you have to have bigger batteries, and that will make the headset more bulkier and more difficult to handle. And the last one is the HDR. So the HDR is basically high definition dynamic range. So the headset should be able to have the same range for a darkness and a brightness of an object, so that it is similar to a real world, right? So these are all also difficult challenges to solve, right? It's not that you're going to have all of these problems solved in just one headset, and you're going to have that at a size of a glasses, and you start wearing and you have a battery of maybe 24 hours. So it'll take time. So it'll take maybe 10 years, like five to 10 years, or even more than that, to get to this point. But yeah, I think these companies are trying to solve this one by one, and as they go. Yeah. So what are your
Definitely.
thoughts?
No, definitely that makes sense. I think these are the different nuances that they need to solve as they want to bring this to a real life. And I mean, I think there are two things that here we need to solve. One is, how do we make that happen? That is through whatever the tools, whatever the devices are, like we have the virtual reality sets that we have, and what does that concept looks like, and how it solves each use case. So yes, I'm totally with you. I mean, and I think these are some of the, I think not easy stuff to solve, but I'm sure, I think with more innovation and more deep dive into that space, we'll be able to come up with something. And I believe we I think there are multiple kind of virtual headsets around, and the one latest one, which I think Facebook released, is the Meta Quest Pro. I think that's probably one of the most expensive ones in the market, which they are mentioning that it's also a number of different things versus a basic virtual reality set, which is around like just like $500 versus
Yep.
Quest Pro, which is I think priced at $1,500. Hopefully, it solves some of the problems that you are saying, and but I'm sure there'll be a ton of opportunities that we need to address on the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. So, and interestingly, let's also talk about like if for any ecosystem to prevail, right, there are a lot of different actors that exist here. So maybe let's look at the customers who will be using the metaverse to make it better. I think the first one is developers, right? There'll be a lot of developers who are creating third-party apps inside the ecosystem which Meta or some other company has created. And that's one of the customer. And there's also creators, right, who use these applications to create content, something like creators on YouTube, creators on Instagram, and creators on TikTok. And the third one is there are also people who consume. That's, people scrolling all the news feed, Instagram feed, and all of that stuff. So these three are the segments which, I think there should be significant advances that happen in the developer ecosystem, targeting the developers, giving them the tools to develop all of the infrastructure around it, games around it, and all of that. And also giving creators the ability to create really good content, right? So that they can easily make content in the virtual world. And also maybe the consumers, make it enjoyable for the consumers to consume that content there. So yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say maybe should we just like quickly go into some of the use cases and then deep dive into one of the each of these use cases?
For sure, definitely. And before we go into that, I would just like to double click on kind of the consumers, the customer segment. I think there are different types of consumers, especially in this pandemic world. And who knows? I mean, that's going to be the future. Especially you take professionals, you take live concert, like the artists who want to play music, and they cannot do in-person events, and there are a lot of different types of consumers, especially in the consumer bucket. I think, I mean, yeah, I just wanted to double click on that.
Yeah, that's right. So there's like different kinds of consumers too on the content and
Exactly.
all of that. So that's a really good point there. Yeah, then maybe there are a lot of use cases, Srinath, right? As we have looked at previously, but maybe we'll concentrate on maybe 4 or 5 of them and see how that could evolve as we go.
Yep.
So some of them are social connections, right? Making sure people get together and have that social space. Something like, people meeting together, having meetups, meeting with the family, and all of that stuff. Social connections is one. Then entertainment, right?
Yeah.
So watching a movie, entertained by games, and all of that stuff is one. And gaming itself is one segment, right, where people come into the virtual world to play games. And there's also fitness that's also showing up a lot. And there's commerce where people buy things, experience things, and maybe shop things. And the last one is maybe people
Any
work.
musical concerts or anything like that as well?
Yeah, that could also be that. Maybe let's put that into social connections, right? Like where
Entertainment. Yeah.
get together. But maybe work is another place where people, number of employees working remotely, work together in metaverse. So yeah, let's maybe get into each of these things and discuss more about that. Social connections, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there are tons of opportunities, especially with respect to social connections. I mean, as we all know today, in order to, for instance, talk to people, you either have to basically do a phone call or do a, I mean, you can send a message, or I mean, third thing, what you can do is a video call. I think, I mean, these are great, but I think we have to go to the next level, immersing ourselves in the real world through a virtual experience. I think that's what this is going to bring. For instance, but let's take an example of Facebook. In order to send a message, you probably will use a messenger, and you have to wait for the person to send back. Versus when you have a virtual reality environment, and then everything is happening real time, and you're basically in kind of in the space, I mean, where you feel like you're directly talking to the person and you're getting the responses real time. So I think that's a different kind of enhanced way of communicating with people.
Yeah. So maybe getting together with all the people around the world, right? Like maybe we all the people in VITs plan for a get together, and it's not necessary that we uh, come to the same place, but maybe experience and look at people's expressions and see the way they communicate in a virtual world at
Exactly.
some point,
I
right?
think of alumni meets, right? So today it's so difficult to organize a virtual, sorry, virtual, not virtual, I mean, a physical alumni meet when everyone is located in different countries, different states, different cities. It's so tough. Versus probably this is very easy to achieve once we have a metaverse like environment where we can bring all the folks together and chill out.
Yeah, that's right. And also, right, yeah, people can argue saying that, yeah, now you can set up a Google Hangout, right? But I think it's just limited to the people close circle we know. So it's not like, okay, all the alumni come in and maybe we come into, say, encounter a person who you haven't met for 10 years and you're like, okay, hey, how are you? I know what you're doing and all of that stuff. I think that kind of chats and all of that would be enhanced and people can connect more, right? The social connection aspect also helps in that piece.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the next one is, I think this is also very big thing, right? Entertainment. So in entertainment now, right, if you want to watch a movie, you go to a theater. But when all the lockdown happened, what were you doing, right? Like you were watching movies and consuming entertainment and all of the content inside the house itself without your friends with you, right? So maybe this could be turn out something where, okay, you're sitting with a friend in a metaverse, and you can see how he laughs. I think that brings in all the vibe, right? Like I go to the theater because you can have fun, laugh, enjoy with together. It brings in that experience when you're staying apart, I would say. So yeah, what do you say?
No, exactly. I hate watching movies alone. I mean, I always have like friends or my family along with me. I think having this metaverse kind of environment really helps. Like, okay, you know that you have someone with you. I mean, while you're watching the movie, I think it's probably kind of creating that more interactive experience when you really like something in the movie, just to discuss and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Versus always, I mean, it may not be always possible to go to a theater, I mean, as you said, in this kind of pandemic kind of situation.
And also like maybe scenarios like if you want to watch cricket in a stadium, uh, how many times have I watched? Like 2 or 3 times max, right? Not more than that. So if I would, maybe if I'm able to experience the same, because the euphoria and the energy in the stadium is different than what you watch in the TV, right? And also in the stadium you might not actually get the complete view of what's happening at the match, but I think you go there for the energy and all of that stuff. And if you are able to experience that, I would definitely want to have more and more of those experiences where I'll experience that in stadium experience, right?
Definitely, because it's not, I mean, a lot of times it becomes very hard to even get like tickets to go see an in person. And that's where I think Metaverse also comes into picture, where it really helps to solve that kind of problem. Where, I mean, it may not be exactly like in person, but it will be very close to that in person experience, and you're not disappointed.
Yeah, and man, yeah, hope. Did you watch the match yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, and I was hoping that we could have won that. So much of hard work and so much of runs, but yeah, I think
Very
T20s are
disappointing.
more of a one day thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the day, how it's as good as the performance you do that day rather than how you perform the whole tournament, right? It can go either
Yeah,
ways.
it's a funny game, so anything can happen any day, and any team can beat any other team. I think we were good earlier, but I think yesterday it was not that day. I think it was
Mhm.
very disappointing day. I mean, I watched whole match all night. I
Yeah.
was like, that's why you might see my like tiring face now. But Yeah.
And that's the
We have to move
determination. You
forward.
like you watch the match whole night, but we're recording a podcast tonight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
that's a podcast. Yep.
That's right. Like keeping that aside, maybe jumping the next use case also. I think this is also pretty popular use case. And I feel that this could be a use case where people will start adapting more and more of the metaverse, which is gaming, right? So I think those are early adopters in whatever technology you see, right? Like phones or PCs and all of that. Gaming industry is big. So I see that when there are more and more people creating really good immersive games, people wouldn't even think of buying those 1500 headsets, and they would want to basically get in and buy those games. And also with all the streaming apps like Twitch going big, you never know, right? People could stream something that's they are playing in a metaverse.
Yep.
Your thoughts?
No, definitely. I think there's a lot of scope, especially in the game. I mean, as you know, I think the popular ones we currently already have is the Sony PlayStation plus the Xbox, who have been kind of revolutionizing this gaming space. I think they've been coming up with very like interesting technology games, and I think I'm sure they will also come up with similar concepts, because I think that's the future. For instance, a lot of games, like for instance, take Counter Strike, which is kind of a group game, which makes more sense and probably more appealing when you play in a virtual reality environment versus just playing at home and your friend is at a different place. So I think there's a lot of potential there and scope for across these. So I'm sure Microsoft and Sony and all these different companies are thinking about this.
Yeah, and also these meme videos, right, where you see people wearing headsets and banging over TVs and hitting people, right? That's a problem, this industry has to solve too. uh,
Definitely. I think we have to come up with various other ways as well and how you can immerse in that experience. For instance, today the only way you can do, I mean, not have a good experience is through headsets. But as you earlier said, we cannot stay with a headset for a long time. I mean, so how do you, for instance, how do you come up with a kind of a monitor or a TV which directly comes up with that experience and you feel that? So without having even a headset, I know it's tough, but how can we think like be more innovative around that so it's less friction for customers and they can directly experience without any hassle of wearing it for a long time and all that stuff.
okay, yeah. So let's move on to the next one, Srinath. So about fitness, right? Like your thoughts.
Yeah, no, fitness is another very good use case. For instance, I mean, there are a lot of popular group classes, right? For instance, a lot of people would like to do group yoga or any group, like any kind of um, any kind of group activity. For instance, if it's a group swimming class or it's a group, I mean, XXX class. So for all that stuff, I think a lot of times probably people may be lazy to go to gym, to drive another 20 minutes and doing a gym for 40 minutes and again have to come 20 minutes and all that stuff. So with kind of taking this experience to fitness as well will really help the people, because few people may be bored doing the gym alone. I mean, you take myself, I'm bored doing gym myself, I feel like lazy, whereas if I have a friend with me coming along, then I enjoy it more because I have, like, I feel like there's someone with me as well. I mean, accomplishing that goal. So yes, fitness is another valid use case, and there's a lot of scope, especially where you have these group kind of classes, any interaction or personal coach and all that stuff. So yes.
Yeah, personal coach reminds me of a thing. Like, so I'm a big fan of Peloton. I have a Peloton treadmill at home. So Peloton actually offers in-person classes. You can actually register for that, and there's a coach who comes in for and teaches all the people who are online. So when you actually go into those classes, right, the coach comes and calls your name sometimes, saying, "Okay, you had 100 runs today," and all of that. And there's also people who are doing high fives, encouraging other people. So I think that social aspect actually motivates you more than you doing alone. So imagine taking that case and putting it in the metaverse where you have people around you, like there's other person who's working really hard and you want to basically compete with them and work more harder. So I think fitness would also be a really good space to be at. But again, technological challenges, I wouldn't want to work out with a heavy headset on me, right? So if it's really lighter, I would maybe want to work out with a set of friends which I would want to hang out with.
Exactly.
Okay, so another use case, commerce. So being a previous Amazon employee, what do you think? How can we do e-commerce in virtual world?
Yeah, so I think this is another interesting use case. So I know a lot of people wanted to go, I mean, shopping with friends, not alone. So I mean, they can maybe ask their opinions about how that looks on them and all that stuff. I think with this virtual reality experience, especially in the e-commerce world, I think it helps solve that use case when, especially during holidays, right? Everyone wants to do shopping, and they may want to see what that looks like in, like, when you directly involve in a real like a virtual environment. For instance, today it's like very static, right? So if you want to go and buy something in an XXX e-commerce website, you basically just search for that and select, and there is no kind of an interactive experience how that looks on, probably on you, or I mean, more like in a kind of an interactive experience which probably is missing today, like how this looks on you, and versus just adding it to cart and then experiencing it after it's delivered. Versus metaverse helps solve the problem of experiencing it before, then you place an order, so you're more happy and you can avoid all the returns.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of times I order something and then see that it's not a fit or it's not the right size, and give it back because I think it doesn't appear the same in the pictures as you perceive it in the real world. So that's one use case. And also when I was like buying furniture for my house, right, I was sending pictures to my parents and all of that stuff. So maybe if the metaverse existed, I would have called them, and we all would have gone to the house to put furniture to pick which one is the best and all of that. So that's a really a good way of looking at that too, right? So yeah, man, it's
Exactly.
interesting, interesting use case. So yeah, let's maybe dive into the last use case. It's also very interesting, and I think it's more relevant now. Work, right? Doing work in the metaverse, because after the pandemic, I never expected that you'll be working from home. Before, I used to work and I used to travel like 2 hours every day for close to 7.5 years, and pandemic changed everything. From then onwards, I've been working from home, right? I never expected that I'll be spending so much time at home. But I also feel that there's this human connection that I'm missing, where you bump up into a colleague and have that water cooler conversation, or talk to a colleague
Yep.
regarding something, right? You're missing all of those conversations, even though going to office 1 or 2 days is, you when there's no one there, it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? But when there are people who you want to hang around or have those conversations, I think there's more personal connection. So I
Yep.
feel that work could be a really big use case if people want to be in the metaverse. But definitely, right, there are also side effects where people wouldn't want to wear a headset for the whole day. Your thoughts?
No, 100%. I think this is extremely going to be very important in future, as remote probably is going to be there. It's not going to go anywhere. I think a lot of people are currently working in remote, especially that kind of interactive experience. Like, take an example, right? If you're a product manager, then you would like to do a lot of whiteboarding, and during that whiteboarding, you would basically need other people's thoughts as well, which becomes a little hard in executing even in a Zoom call, versus in a virtual environment where you will feel that presence, as well as the presence of others. Then you will feel like you're probably in a more like an office environment. So yes, 100% valid. I think it solves a number of different challenges, especially for people who work with various number of people. It becomes pretty easy when you have that kind of environment versus a Zoom call, or even like take a chat and, I mean, take any example of a chat tool, like even Slack, right? Even though there are multiple options, like for example, in Slack, you have channels, an example. But I mean, I would say the in-person experience, the virtual reality experience outweighs any of this other offline communications.
Yeah, and also especially right before workshops were, when you're in person workshops, right, you try to do ideation sessions or solutioning sessions, like you have a group of people thinking, moving stickies around and all of that, brainstorming, right? But there's Miro, but it's very difficult to have that feel, right? Even though
Exactly.
everybody's on camera, but when you can have that feeling where multiple people in multiple different locations can come together, I think it's really collaborative and more productive, and you can come out with really really good solutions if you do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward, if that actually happens in my lifetime where I work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be beneficial to a lot of working people, especially in the remote employees. I think who are permanent remote. I think I feel some of the people are already feeling like, oh, I'm missing the office experience. I need to go to office. But even if I go to office, there's no one in the office right now because everyone comes in a different day, schedule, and all that stuff. Versus having this virtual experience, I think brings probably more adoption. I think it helps solve that problem as well.
Yeah, that's good. So a lot of different use cases, Srinath. So we have discussed, technological challenges, use cases, and maybe let's take a quick look at the finances of things, right? So I have put together some numbers and tried to let's see if it makes sense for Meta or any other company to invest so much, or what would be the variables to reach to that point where this creating a metaverse or a headset would be profitable. When you look at the number of users who are buying headsets, in 2019 it has been 11 million. 2020 it has been 14 million. 2021 16, and it's growing over a rate of 14% every year. And maybe for 2024 you might get to a point where it is 34 million. So that's the number of people, users who are using it. And I was also looking at how much Facebook was earning per user, revenue per user, right? Looks like it is, in the US it's like 50, in some Europe it's 16, and some other countries that's different. But on an average, it's close to $10 or something where they earn per user. So let's maybe put that numbers and see like how many users should Facebook get if it has to recoup all of its investments into metaverse. But there could be so many variables into this is just my guesstimate or blind guess here. So let's assume that there are close to 10 million users in 2022, and I did a 14% year over year increase in the number of users. And by 2030, if that's the case, there'll be just 30 million users using um, the headsets, and the revenue is close to 300 million. Definitely that's not feasible, right? Looking at Meta's investment, they're like putting 10 billion every year, so that's like 100 billion. Putting in 100 billion, and looking at those numbers, I think that's not feasible at this point. But let's maybe take another. This was a very conservative approach. The next one was basically putting 60% year over year growth in the number of users of the people buying headsets. If let's assume that the technology gets better and better, there are more people drawn towards some of these use cases, and there are also a lot of developers developing applications and making it easier for things. So that makes it more appealing, and the number of users grows over 60% year over year. If that is the case, I think by end of 2030 there'll be close to 800 to 900 million people using metaverse. And when we look at $10 per user, it's close to 8 to 10 billion revenue. And 100 billion, putting in 100 billion in R&D and getting 8 to 10 billion, and is it viable? Not sure. But I think the revenue per customer also would increase. The consumer spending would also increase over time. So there are a lot of variables where you'll have use cases where even organizations would come in for the work side of things and pitch in more money, right? Like per users, and there
Yeah.
could be subscriptions, and there could be multiple sources of revenue that maybe Meta or some other
Manage.
company could develop. So overall, I would say looking at pure numbers, and it's not the right way maybe also to predict what the number of users or revenue would be. But I'd say there needs to be a lot of overhaul or a lot of different revenue sources that has to come in to
Yep.
make this a reality and make this more profitable. Yeah, thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a very complex space. And I think taking that technology to people and making sense out of it to the people is extremely important in order to drive more users and more revenue. I think companies need to figure out various other revenue opportunities. For instance, how do we, for instance, you can figure out showing ads. For instance, if you are participating in a musical concert in a virtual environment, I mean, you can need to think about how do you sell that virtual environment space for various ads, right? So there are various other things that these companies should look into, and also I think the companies also need to emphasize the use cases, the importance of that. And I don't think many people, I mean, around, I mean, maybe uh, in like popular cities are aware, but how would I take that to tier 2, tier 3 cities and educate people about this? I think the adoption probably is pretty low there. We need to emphasize and train people and what this solves, why it's important and what it solves. So yeah, there are various other things that the companies should think about. Last but not least, the companies also should need to think about what are the other ways that we can experience this virtual environment. For instance, today, in order to purchase a virtual reality headset, basic one costs at least like close to $500, and an expensive one costs like close to $1,500, which is both I feel are pretty expensive. And we need to figure out what are the other ways that we could show, because it's not, the revenue is just not coming only from headsets, right? So we should, as we discussed, we should think about alternative ways of generating that revenue. For instance, like if you get this revenue through ads or like through kind of any posts, right? That way you are getting the revenue from there. So how can I reduce this? Give them a kind of a way to view that and make this cheaper and try to get the revenue from alternative sources. That way they're not just relying on the like on the money from the devices.
Yeah, perfect. And my biggest takeaways are, I feel that, looking at the technological challenges and solving them, that would be the first one. Reducing the price of the headset would be the second one, or maybe increasing the value which the headset provides so that people can justify the cost of it rather than just having it and playing one or two games in it. And the third one is also the battery life, right? Making sure the battery life is similar to a phone or something like that. So these are the technological and financial challenges, and there's also ecosystem challenges where more and more people come in to develop APIs, applications, and making the platform more smooth and more lucrative. And also, I'd say more and more companies trying to solve for any of these things. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd say these are the three biggest takeaways. And great session, Srinath. So yeah, let's maybe wrap it up here. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Sidhu.